Thank you very much.
I'm going to talk to you about what it means to have had enough of cybersecurity, or to have had enough of anything, really. But in cybersecurity, there's a couple of rules of thumb that we talk about because you're never really done with security, right? You didn't get attacked today, so you must have done enough, but you're not sure about tomorrow, so how do you sleep tonight knowing you're making it through? So look at those rules of thumb out there, and that's kind of what you hear from the cyber industry. Maybe your cybersecurity budget ought to be 10% of your overall IT budget. Maybe that's a goal you have. Rather uninspiring. It doesn't tell you why, it doesn't tell you anything about risk, doesn't tell you anything about whether that's good or bad, or whether you should feel good about it the next day. All the way down to some things that security is my #1 priority, some other things that are interesting to say, it might or might not be true. They don't really tell the whole picture. In the middle column, I list a few things there that talk about risk and starts to introduce the concept that if we do nothing else out there, maybe we should understand what our liability is if we get this wrong, and maybe what we can live with and what we shouldn't have to live without. Different take on it. So things look a little different there. Sounds a little more techie, sounds a little more analytical. Sounds like you probably talked to a financial officer to maybe firm up some numbers. On the right side are some fluffy things. You know, this is what you get when you go to presentations and they talk about the Covey method and they talk about some other things about it, organizational teamwork. Maybe you want to be known as engaged, modern, responsive, and professional. Maybe that's what you want your security team to be noted for at the end of the day. So somewhere in here is the truth of what enough is. You want a workforce that understands what their role is, what they're trying to achieve as far as big goals are, and then you also need to figure out what your risks are, the analytical side. You still have to communicate to people what it is, so that's where the rules of thumb come in. I don't know that any of them are particularly useful, but I will tell you that I used to travel around to different places as a director of survivability, and I could go anywhere, really, in a strange place, and I could instantly look at something and say, are they doing enough? Are they doing it right? Are they doing it to standard? Is 2 HESCO barriers right on the bottom of this picture for the base level wall? Is 1 HESCO barrier on the top of that enough for the second wall? Is that sunshade that's over on the right here, on the far right, just a piece of plywood and some 2x4, is that really what's required? Is that going to get the job done for all the threats that they perceive, and do they have enough defensive posture and presence and firepower and things to make this all work? I can do that anywhere because I've been doing it a long time. Cyber world is exactly the same thing. Your professionals are going to know, how do I survive out there? What is really out there that matters, and what does it take to really survive out there? How much of this is fluff? How much of this is just right? How much of this is too much? The second thing that you probably ought to know is what happens when it gets attacked, or something's gone wrong, or you think something's gone wrong. And that's what to fix and who to call. Great companies like Dataprise will come out and say something's going on, we need to look at it, and then they're going to present bills to you, and you're going to have to know where your limits are, or they're going to present capabilities to you might or might not need to take action on, unless you look at the cost-benefit analysis for your group and how you want to get it done. So I think those two things will really start to describe what enough looks like to probably 95% of the organizations, whether you're a nonprofit that's just concerned with providing legal services, but you've got a lot of information out there you need to protect, or maybe you're an association that deals a lot with healthcare. Maybe that information should use some extra protection, or you're dealing with credit card information. A lot of people are getting themselves wrapped around the axle legally with that. What did you do to protect it? What didn't you do to protect it? If you start at the bottom and you go, what's my major threat, and how do I survive if it all goes south? Who do I call if it all goes south? If you can answer those two questions, you're going to be okay. You've got to get in a little bit of data because you're data types for the most part, or you wouldn't be here. So who are your users? Who's on the network that you're on? Are you sharing a network with another company? On your network, have you allowed other people to plug into your network? Do you know who they are? Do you know who they've plugged into to expose your network? If you believe Verizon's 2016 breach incident report, and I do, then they'll tell you 97% of the breaches leverage legitimate third-party people on your network. So people that you've authorized to be on your network, you think they're doing good work for you, and they probably are, but somehow they've been compromised, and they've brought that compromise into your organization and caused your breach. Now, that's a pain that you can grouse about, or you can understand that that's a major attack vector into your network, and you need to take action because it's probably your case. 97% is a big number. I think the average breach is about $4 million in remediation last year. So that's a large process. So the bigger you are, the more records you have, that becomes an issue. If you're a small organization but you have 10 million healthcare records, your liability is rather large. So you need to take action about that. You might need to think about cyber insurance, some other ideas to kick around in the C office. What devices are those people that are attached to your network using? In the Internet of Things, it becomes very hard to figure out what's attached to the network, what should be attached to the network, and what is going to get compromised at the end of the day. 85%, if you believe Microsoft, of the exploits for the Office suite can be remediated just by removing administrative rights from your users. So every CISO worth his salt is going to say, hey, look, I got to know who's on my network. I got to know what third parties and what our agreements are with those third parties and how we're monitoring them. But I also need to limit the amount of people who can ride administrator accounts on our network. Now, your service provider might not be doing this in your interest, so you need to check up on them. Your service provider should be one or two or three or a handful of folks known to you who have administrative rights. The adversary, he comes into your network, sits around on your network, and he tries to find an admin account. If he finds that admin account, he is now in charge. That's the easiest exploit around. It's the most common exploit, really. And lastly, what did you allow this guy to do, or this person to do? If the adversary finds his way into your network, how is he going to exfil the data? How is he going to take something out of your network? If you believe FireEye, 90% of the attacks will originate with email. So they're going to email something to somebody in your office, and that person is going to take an action which will allow something to get put into your network, loaded into your network. Might even be a part of something, and it might require a couple of other people to do something as well. Pretty sophisticated attacks. It sounds kind of mumbo-jumbo-y maybe, but those are big numbers up there, right? Anybody disagree with those numbers violently? I'll agree with 95% of the breaches, third party, maybe 80% of the stuff. There's another couple big numbers for you. So we have a lot of challenges. Everybody's been out there. Scott mentioned what it means to have breaches or to have problems and damage on your network. And anybody here shop at Home Depot and get caught up in their problem a few years ago? I did. Man, you guys don't go shopping at Home Depot? Lowe's? It's Lowe's? It must be Montgomery County or something. So millions of people have their credit cards. That's a real problem once you start saying millions of this. Sony, a great company, technically advanced people, build almost all the TV sets and a lot of the electronics you have in your house. They couldn't possibly not know exactly what's going on with electronics. Turns out they have a little issue. I don't mean to blame Sony Electronics. Samsung, same thing. If you go into your hotel room and you're watching a Samsung TV, you can download the app onto your iPhone that can help you watch that TV. And are the credentials going back and forth? Are they secure? Probably not. Don't tell your friends or your friendly hackers, or they'll turn your TV on and off all night. Same thing for your home TV. JP Morgan will sell you cyber services. Ernst & Young will sell you cyber services. They are among the best in the business. All the big banks are. They're very expensive. They are not immune to this, however. And so millions of households affected. I think JP Morgan does $1 trillion a day. It might even be $3 trillion a day through that bank. So they are a big target, and it's a tough thing for them. You guys aren't that big a target, right? I don't know. 21 million government employees at OPM. It wasn't the OPM breach. It was a different department that had a breach that was connected into the OPM networks that made it fall. So back to that third-party comment, there was a real big thanks for nothing note to somebody that day that got stolen. 80 million healthcare records. I can't believe the healthcare folks can't figure it out. You really want your healthcare stuff protected. There's laws about it, healthcare management laws, HIPAA compliance requirements. And it turns out that some of the biggest insurers and hospitals have struggles with this. This is really why. It's hard to keep up with all the technologies out there. So even the old exploits are good. The old exploits are also cheap. So every couple years, it gets cheaper and cheaper to attack networks, and the old stuff is dirt cheap, but it still works. So for 5 years ago, what I would have to spend $100,000 on a really cool kit to attack networks, now I can pick that kit up for $30,000. Real price break for criminals. So I want to go through what a sophisticated attack might look like. If this attack is successful, you are going to have any one of those previous breaches I could have played a part in. So this is my personal account just a couple of weeks ago as I was getting ready to speak. You're looking at my Gmail government account. It's a special place that Google sets up for us with special monitoring and special protections. And if you look down a little bit on that, you'll see a message from John Davis. He's a good friend of mine. He's also an Army general that I know, so I'm attracted to that message. I'm already inclined to click on it and open it. He's also an executive at Palo Alto, who I do a lot of business with. So there's another reason that I'm interested in it. This is actually from his Palo Alto account. So if this is, oh my, that's wonderful. So when I receive this message, I'm either being targeted or this is just going out to a bunch of people on John Davis's account and I'm just caught up in the flesh. In any case, I'm going to click on it because it says, hey Chuck, take a look at this, which is so cool because he's interested in me. And he gives me this kind of gooned up looking picture, has a lot of logos on it. Looks a little bit like Dropbox that's been mangled by a car or something. It doesn't look quite right. So you know something's wrong here, but they're asking for very simple things, and I want to get at his message. So they're asking me to put in my account information, and that's really all they need, right? Because once I click on this, they either have my account information and can come back and attack later, or they can attack me personally later, or they can go back and use that information to bother John later. Or they can get right into the network, or I could load something right into the network with the credentials that I have. So if I'm logged in as admin Chuck, I could load some really cool things inadvertently into my network. So your admins shouldn't be logged in as admins when they're just doing regular office work, one. And two, this hits us all. It might hit me because I got a cool cybersecurity title and people target me from time to time just to see if they can get me to screw up. But it generally goes out to thousands of users, very similar, and it's a very dangerous attack. I don't want to be responsible for bringing down the Maryland government network or exposing tax and treasury information or any of those things. So I try to do what I can. In a sophisticated organization, your security folks should be sending out these kinds of attacks to your personnel on a regular basis and just showing it to them and say, hey, you shouldn't have clicked all that. You shouldn't have done that. And whatever your training program allows, but that's a pretty easy looking thing. That's a very sophisticated attack that can bring down a network. I do a lot of things for the state of Maryland. I appreciate all your attention here today. I don't want to mystify cybersecurity, so I tried to keep it a little simple. But I think I showed you the biggest problem. Email is how it's going to hit you. It looks like anything else, and what the actual exploit is Yeah, there are security professionals who can tell you what just happened to you, but as a business leader, you got to know that it comes in and it looks like everything else that comes in. And you got to work with your folks to make sure they understand that, how that works. I work with various legislators to improve the cyber climate in Maryland across a broad range of issues, whether it's law, public policy, whether it's education, workforce development. My good friend from Commerce Department, Kim McCready, is here, so also all you local businesses, Commerce is out here. Ken's also former Army, and that's why he had that excited guttural moment when you mentioned the Air War College. Yeah. And also what's there is, after we get to critical infrastructure protection, is a small plan that's laid out. And this plan is basically what I'm trying to get the state government to work through. So it's a straight National Institute of Science and Technology instantiation of the framework. So the NIST framework you'll hear about, it sounds terrifying. It's 4 feet thick. It's a federal thing, so it's going to be hard to read. Not everybody's going to understand it. But it is a good document in that it gives you some idea of what's important. What it tells you is if you did those 5 things I told you about before, you're probably going to be halfway done. So I really saved you from reading about 3 inches of federal paperwork, and you can thank me later. But you'll see I'm just writing policy for the first few months, and we're just about done with that. We talk about patching, baselining, getting those basic networking functions together so that we can start centralizing our security posture. Those are networking. Patching is not a security feature. It's a function your network professionals should just be doing. So this isn't build your security enterprise until you're broke. This is outfit your networking people with the appropriate tools and resources so they can do basic attention. If you're patched, remember, from those big numbers, a lot of those problems go away just by being patched. Help your network team do that. We're going to establish a baseline on operating system across the government. That's a huge undertaking. It's a medium-sized network, 70,000 people, plus or minus. Spans every industry known. I have 11 hospitals that are part of us. And that concerns me greatly because I have a great deal of health information out there. I have a great deal of private information. Most of the citizens in Maryland go through the motor vehicles department. A lot of information there. Most of you in Maryland pay taxes because Maryland is what it is. I have that information as well. So this is important that we do this. I'm just trying to tell people that the front door is locked. I'm not trying to defeat nation-state actors at this point. Just trying to keep the rookies out. 2017, which for me starts in 3 weeks on the fiscal year, we're up in our game. We're starting to centralize the security controls. We're starting to get further into the NIST framework, which tells us there's more controls out there, more things to look for, really just trying to establish what I call the Neighborhood Watch program. And now we've gone from just plain defense to looking around the rest of the neighborhood and seeing what else is out there on the network. And lastly, we'll go into a continuous monitoring mode. We'll be looking at the network 24/7, trying to figure out who's attacking us, why they're attacking us, and how should we thwart them. So we'll look at whether they're known threats, unknown threats, or just variants of existing threats. Pretty tough act to follow. All of it is resource dependent. All of it is based on whatever risk I can tell the government that they are mitigating by doing these steps. So I'll compete my resources to get a large part of this done, much the same as you will in your own offices with your 1 or 2 people or 15 or 20 people. I'll be competing with the rest of the state budget to try to make this, as much of this happen as possible. Where I have compliance concerns, where I have issues with, I was talking to a young man from environmental services out there. We've got a DNR out there, Department of Natural Resources, that does all sorts of environmental work out there. So we have all of those compliance issues. We're Maryland government, so we create a lot of the compliance issues. Those apply to state government as well. It's a big mission. But if you do those first 5 things, that's a great first step. And that's what I would leave you with before I turn it over.
Thank you very much.
All right.